It's easy to trust a road you've driven 100 times, even at 2 a.m., even in the rain, especially on a highway as busy and familiar as the Meizhou-Dabu Expressway. On May 1st, 2024, that trust shattered. The hills around Meizhou were soaked from days of relentless rain. Mist clung to the treetops. The air hung heavy, thick with silence, the kind that makes everything feel a little too still. Traffic moved as usual. Drivers leaned into the curves. Music played low. Brake lights blinked through the fog. No one knew they were driving toward the edge of something that didn't exist yet. And when the moment came, it came fast. No warning signs, no sirens, just one stretch of road that vanished into the earth. By the time morning light touched the mountains, dozens were missing. Families were gone, and one of China's most traveled roads had turned into a question with no easy answer. What failed? What was missed? And how did one man, a 64-year-old father, stop dozens more from joining them? Let's begin. Headlights flicker through the fog. Windshield wipers click in rhythm. The world feels suspended, like everyone's just trying to get somewhere safely before sunrise. That night, the Meizhou-Dabu Expressway was alive with movement. It was the start of China's 5-day Labor Day holiday, a time when millions pack up their cars, buckle in their kids, and hit the roads for family visits, countryside drives, or long-awaited reunions. Some of the cars carried young couples returning from their first trip together. Others were filled with grandparents and grandchildren, whispering softly in the back seat. There were delivery vans, work trucks, old sedans loaded with luggage and leftover snacks. And then, at 2:10 a.m., the road didn't crack, it vanished beneath them. It wasn't gradual, and it wasn't loud. It was sudden and terrifying, as 18 meters of asphalt just gave out, dropping 23 cars into a pit carved by rain and time. Some vehicles landed on their roofs, others exploded on impact. One was so twisted it took hours to identify. Several simply vanished under the earth and mud, headlights still faintly glowing as they were buried. Morning came with silence and a photo. From above, the expressway looked like it had been split by a knife. One half remained, lined with parked cars and emergency lights. The other half was gone, replaced by a torn hillside and broken trees. No warning signs, no cones, no time. Among those who fell were families who had paused for late-night meals hours before. Others were just returning home, parents picking up loved ones, workers heading home for the holiday. Some of them were asleep, some never even knew what was coming. By Thursday, the official death toll had climbed to 48. 30 more were injured, most still in shock, trying to piece together how a simple drive turned into a freefall. These weren't thrill seekers. They were commuters, sons, daughters, couples planning summer weddings, children with bags of candy in their laps. They were travelers in motion, and somewhere along that road between Meizhou and Dabu, their stories stopped all at once. The hills around Meizhou had been soaked for weeks, not just a passing drizzle, but relentless downpours, hundreds of millimeters of rain inundating slopes and saturating the ground. By late April, the soil was waterlogged. Mudslides had already blocked nearby roads. Villages lived in fear of the collapsing earth. Even rescue teams earlier in the week had navigated mud-choked highways amid steady rain. This wasn't ordinary rain. It was enough to soften embankments, swell groundwater levels, and turn concrete supports into ticking hazards. At 2:10 a.m. on May 1st, the soaked earth finally snapped. Thousands of tons of asphalt and concrete slid down the hillside in seconds because the heavy rain sliced through the Meizhou-Dabu Expressway, making it lose its footing. Rescue workers later described the scene as a curving scar gouged in the forest canopy. Emergency crews arrived under the same steady rain that caused the disaster, each step soaked, each excavation unstable. Experts later confirmed this was a natural landslide, worsened by heavy rainfall and weakened embankment fill. Rain-soaked soil lost cohesion. Highway fill shifted. Earth gave way. This wasn't due to shoddy asphalt or seismic tremors. It was a combination of geology, extreme weather, and mounting water pressure. And once it started, there was no stopping it. But just seconds later, before emergency crews, before barriers, before sirens, one man stepped into the dark and tried to stop what nature had already set in motion. His name is Huang Shandu. He was 64 years old at the time, a retired driver. That night, he was behind the wheel again, headed home with his family after a quiet holiday. They were minutes behind the collapse. Huang's car jolted suddenly. A wheel hub had cracked. He pulled over to check it. That's when he heard the noise. Not thunder, not rain. It was the unmistakable sound of steel melting earth. And the even worse sound that followed, cars vanishing into blackness. He looked up and saw it, taillights falling. 1, 2, 3, gone. The road ahead wasn't a road anymore, just a cliff lined with smoke and silence. Huang didn't hesitate. He shouted into the night. His wife and daughter turned on their phone flashlights. They waved their arms and screamed at the oncoming traffic. "Stop! Don't go forward!" But no one listened. Cars kept coming, engines humming toward the drop. So Huang did the only thing left to do. He walked toward the edge, against traffic, against reason. And when a driver tried to steer around him, he dropped to his knees right there in the middle of the highway. It worked. The car skidded to a stop. The driver rolled down the window and shouted, "Are you trying to get yourself killed?" Huang didn't flinch. He explained what had happened. That driver, Kai Wanda, got out, looked, and understood. Together, they started waving down more cars. Within minutes, dozens of vehicles had stopped. Hundreds of lives were spared because one man refused to let them fall. Days later, Kai drove 800 kilometers with his parents and sister to thank Huang in person. He brought a bouquet and a red silk banner with 6 golden words. "You risked your life to save mine." Huang's daughter said it best, "My father is a superhero." What happened on the Meizhou-Dabu Expressway wasn't a one-time event. It was a warning that came too late, and it wasn't the only one. Because all across southern China that spring, the skies weren't just heavy, they were unrelenting. Rain fell for days, then weeks, soaking hillsides, loosening roots, flooding homes and farmland until entire towns felt like they were slowly sinking. Over 110,000 people were forced to leave everything behind. They packed bags, locked doors, and watched the water rise through windows. And just when they thought it might stop, the sky sent something else. A tornado. It touched down in Guangzhou without warning, shredding rooftops and killing 5 people in its path. This wasn't just bad weather, it was something different, heavier and faster, and it didn't care what stood in its way. Bridges, factories, villages, expressways, all erased within hours. China's top leader, Xi Jinping, issued a warning. He called the condition strong atmospheric convection, a technical phrase that meant more storms, more landslides, and more loss. He told local officials to prepare, to inspect roads, reinforce slopes, sound alarms before things break. But when the highway collapsed, no alarm sounded. The earth moved first, and people followed. And then, just months later, it happened again. Another highway, another rain-soaked hill, another fall. This time in Shaanxi province, with more cars and more lives. This wasn't just one crack in the road. It was the beginning of something bigger, a question no one wanted to answer. What happens when the land you're standing on can't hold you anymore? That question came faster than the rescue teams. How does a modern expressway built to withstand time, weight, and weather disappear in the middle of the night? The answer was quiet and damning, because this wasn't just a collapse, it was also a failure. Not sabotage, not a sudden geological shift, but rain and unstable terrain, and a road that should have been watched more closely than it was. Within days, Guangdong's provincial government launched a full investigation. The results weren't vague, they named names. 4 government departments were held responsible. 32 officials were punished. Some were dismissed from their posts, others were demoted. Their failure wasn't about doing the wrong thing, it was about not doing enough. About not inspecting when the land was soaked, not reinforcing a hillside that had already shown signs of strain. And it didn't end there. It happened again. 12 more lives lost. 18 cars were swallowed by floodwaters. Different provinces, same story. And that story leads to a bigger question. When you build higher, faster, and farther than anyone else, what keeps it standing when the weather shifts? Southern China has always been a land of slopes and rivers, a place where roads must climb, twist, and cling to the sides of mountains. And for years, they did. But how many roads can a country build before the ground pushes back? In the past 20 years, China's constructed more than 100,000 miles of expressways, enough to circle the earth 3 times. Bridges suspended across deep valleys, tunnels bored through mountains where the sky disappears. It's all an engineering marvel. But what happens when the climate changes faster than the blueprints? By 2017, 81 of the world's 100 tallest bridges stood in China. By 2025, some of those same bridges are facing new threats. Heavier rainfall, flash floods, and unpredictable terrain shifts. Are they built to survive what's coming? Guangdong, where the Meizhou-Dabu highway collapsed, is known for its fragile terrain. When it rains not for a day, but for weeks, the soil weakens. Hillsides turn to sponge. Entire slopes start to shift. Was that slope ever reevaluated? Did the engineers imagine this much rain? Were the retaining walls built for the climate of the past or the storms of the future? The Meizhou-Dabu collapse wasn't an isolated failure. It was a warning, and it's not just Meizhou. In 2025, while monsoon storms and tropical remnants flooded roads from Sichuan to the Pearl River Basin, weeks of flooding overwhelmed aging flood defenses. Infrastructure, once thought unstoppable, was failing. When the rain pounds with a force unseen in decades, how many bridges, tunnels, or highways buckle next? It's easy to build quickly, harder to inspect thoroughly. And in regions where roads are remote and the weather is changing fast, some stretches go untouched for years. Rainfall isn't just water, it's weight. And when that weight presses down on ground that's already been carved, paved, and buried, it doesn't knock politely, it breaks through. The collapse on May 1st wasn't caused by ambition. It was caused by forgetting what ambition demands: maintenance, vigilance, and humility. Roads aren't permanent just because they're concrete, and mountains don't care how wide the lanes are. So we ask again, if this was just one road, what's waiting beneath the next? There's a kind of violence that doesn't shout. It doesn't come with fire or fury. It just takes, quietly, permanently. One second the road was there, the next it wasn't. And with it went mothers, sons, entire families, swallowed by the ground they trusted. But this isn't just about asphalt and rain. It's about the silence that follows. About the gaps left behind in living rooms, on message threads, in front seats now empty. And still, we're told it was an accident, as if no one could have seen this coming. But rain doesn't fall in secret. Warnings were issued, patterns were clear, the land tried to speak, and no one listened. So yes, the road failed, but so did the people meant to keep it safe. We remember the 48 lives lost, but also the questions left hanging in the air. Why wasn't it reinforced? Why wasn't it closed? Why did so many have to die before someone paid attention? Because the truth is, roads collapse, but oversight collapses first. Responsibility erodes faster than the soil beneath. And if we don't hold on to this story, if we let it fade into statistics and rubble, it'll happen again, somewhere else, to someone else. So let this be more than a headline. Let it be a reckoning, a refusal to forget. Because what broke that night wasn't just the highway, it was the promise that someone was watching. And if this story stayed with you, let it travel further, because memory's how we make sure it never gets buried.